Polish publisher and developer CD Projekt, best known for its gaming adaptations of The Witcher and Cyberpunk, has unleashed an ambitious new plan for its future. This future involves a bunch of new games from familiar franchises and new IP alike from studios all over the world, hopefully delivered in better shape than 2020 Cyberpunk 2077. We already know that Cyberpunk 2077 is receiving a lone DLC expansion called Phantom Liberty, and that comes to PlayStation 5 in 2023. Amazingly, they're also still claiming that The Witcher 3 will come to PS5 before the end of this year, though it still doesn't have a date, and we're about 12 weeks from 2023. But there's much more. You may recall that CD Projekt brought the Boston-based team called the Molasses Flood in 2021. They are known for the RPG The Flame and the Flood, but they weren't bought to explore more of that franchise. Instead, they are creating what is currently known as Project Sirius, quote, a game set in the Witcher universe, but differs from past releases in that it targets a much broader audience. Sirius will provide both single-player and multiplayer gameplay, end quote. More relevant to Witcher fans than that is the continuation of the core franchise, which will happen across a new trilogy. The first game in the trilogy is known internally as Polaris, and once Polaris launches, CD Projekt intends on getting the third game out in that trilogy no later than 6 years after the fact, an ambitious feat that will require the games to go in development in some way simultaneously. But there's another Witcher project in the works too called Canis Majoris. This game will run in Unreal Engine 5 as opposed to CD Projekt's proprietary Red Engine, and is being externally developed, though CD Projekt has declined to say by whom. Likewise, Cyberpunk will also be supported beyond the DLC for 2077, though perhaps not as ambitious as with The Witcher. The new Cyberpunk game is called Project Orion, and this game, perhaps true to its setting, will be made in the United States by an all-new, yet-to-be-revealed American CD Projekt studio. This team will apparently also work out of Boston, home of their other U.S. team. More importantly, as noted in the write-up from the company, quote, we will be able to fully tap into the North American talent pool, end quote. And then there's one more game, one from a new IP. It's codenamed Hadar, and though it's an idea that's several years old, it only saw advancement to the conceptual stage in 2021. As such, quote, it is important to understand that right now we are still working on basic concepts and laying the groundwork for this new franchise, end quote. And in an unusual move, they publicly note that they are looking for external partners to work with on future gaming projects, as well as multimedia projects akin to their new Netflix hit Cyberpunk Edge Runners. CD Projekt, founded in 1994, employs more than 1,000 people around the world, with that headcount set to balloon in the coming months and years. As revealed, it has at least 7 separate games in development. Its first full release, 2007's The Witcher, was based on a popular Polish fantasy novel, and the book and game series are intimately intertwined, even though some legal and financial problems once threatened to separate the studio from author Andrzej Sapkowski. The first Witcher game to come to PlayStation consoles was 2015's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and indeed, the first 2 Witcher games have still not been released on PlayStation, with the second game coming to Xbox 360 in 2011. Its newest game, Cyberpunk 2077, was also based on an IP it doesn't own, making its project Hadar especially a vital piece of its long-term future. Man, there's a lot there. A lot of excitement here, though, around CD Projekt. Dustin, let's go to you first. What do you think? 7 games. So we have a couple of random Witcher games, then a trilogy of Witcher games. So that's 5. A Cyberpunk game is 6. And then this new IP is 7. Plus DLC and back support and all the rest. So they're going to be very, very busy. This comes on the back of poor performance by Cyberpunk 2077 critically, at least initially, a drop in their market cap, but they're recovering and moving forward. And I got to say, I kind of like this because not necessarily that they're making whatever they're making. I like a studio saying, here's what we're doing. Here are the code names and some vagaries. You don't have to go digging. You don't have to go asking. We'll say more about each of them when we're ready. And like talk to people like adults. And I dig. So what do you have to say about CD Projekt's info dump?
Can I play some devil's advocate with you, Colin?
Of course.
Because I based on some, how people reacted to one of our older episodes, is that how does this differ from Ubisoft laying out all the Assassin's Creed games for you?
How does it differ? I guess it doesn't in that way. I guess what I would say is that Ubisoft has a different cadence traditionally, and Assassin's Creed is a different franchise. The Witcher and Assassin's Creed came out the same year. There are 3 Witcher games. And now there will be 8. Right? So
right.
I totally understand. I think that's more than devil's advocate. I think that's a good point. But I just think that the expectations are a little different. I don't want to hear anything about Assassin's Creed when they've run it into the ground so much. This is simply laying a roadmap out. So I think you make a fair point, but I just think when you think that The Witcher, it came to PC in 2007, Assassin's Creed came to PS3 in 2007, And then by 2011, there were 4, I think, Assassin's Creed games, and then The Witcher 2 came out. And then by 2015, there was something like 15 Assassin's Creed games, and the third game came out, and now we're at like 22. And there's a few games that we don't know about from The Witcher. So I totally hear you. Yeah. And but I just think it's the same and not at the same time.
So overall, I feel like I think that the reason why they probably laid these all out is that it's clear they're going to be hiring a lot of people in order to make these projects a reality. Specifically, they even mentioned they want to tap into the North American talent pool by starting this new team in Boston to make this new Cyberpunk game. But at the same time, I think that there's that aspect of it, but there's also, when we were talking about Assassin's Creed, that this, I think, is going to be a format of how we find out about games going forward. The very Marvel style, here's our roadmap. It doesn't matter how long it takes or whatever. We're just laying out everything for you to see, which I don't know. I'm kind of mixed about in some way. For me, it's like the fact they laid out all of these Witcher games, like, is that necessary? Do we need this many Witcher games? But I mean, Witcher is a huge IP. I'm not like not into it, but I also don't think it's amazing or anything like that. But to lay out your company's future for that far in advance, I feel like it's obvious that there's going to be plans that change, and I'm sure that they know that, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's so far off. It's curious. It's like, it almost means nothing in some ways, but I guess if you're a Witcher fan, this is exciting because you're getting a lot more Witcher. And if you're a Cyberpunk fan, it's nice to know that the IP is not totally dead from what happened with the first game. In fact, it seems like Cyberpunk now is more alive than ever thanks to Edge Runners. But
yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Clearly, like I said, though, they're going to be hiring a lot of people.
Chris, what do you have to add?
Man, yeah, I don't give a shit about this at all. it's like, it is, well, to me, it's like, and let me just preface it by saying this reminds me a lot of Todd Howard being like, yeah, Fallout 5 is, man, that's gonna be a thing for sure. And like Elder Scrolls 6, yeah, you'll see that at some point.
Dude, they made a trailer.
Yeah, they announced Elder Scrolls 6, which is funny.
Yeah. So to me, it's just like, I understand what you're trying to do. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get as much news about Cyberpunk out while the news is still positively in their favor. So they have a lot of positive coverage. A lot of their SEO is really, really good right now. So now is the best time to announce any plans that are going to future titles, I'm actually pretty convinced that this next Cyberpunk game is large. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this was largely like the existence of this game is largely due to how well Edge Runners tested either internally, like before it came out, or the fact that it's doing super well. I think they always kind of planned it, but I could totally believe that was something that they had just in case. Well, it's like, oh, people. What was it?
I was going to say for sure that for sure this is somewhat fluid because the studio doesn't exist yet.
Right, exactly. So this game's not in development currently. No. So this is just it's like they probably had a plan for something in the future that they probably nixed when the game launched in a really fucked state. And now that it's back on the up and up, they're kind of dusting off the treasure chest and being like, hey, we had this. We're going to make this, and now that you guys like our game. And it's cool. I kind of agree with you, Colin, that it's not as bad as Ubisoft, where they're running these franchises into the ground. I think we could do well for some more Witcher and certainly more Cyberpunk. I would love to see more of that world, and especially more of that world in a capacity where I could look forward to another RPG in that setting. But I will say, I'm not excited about this because CD Projekt Red does not have my trust at all. Like, they made a great game. I think they made a great game from the get-go, but I will never trust any of their games at launch for a while. Like, they would have to hit like a pretty straight cadence of solid release, which, by the way, they never really have. The Witcher 1 and 2, as I recall from people who I know who have played it, were not particularly solid at launch. The Witcher 3 had a bunch of problems. And then Cyberpunk is obviously, that story's been told to death. So I don't foresee a reality where I'm so excited for a CD Projekt Red game that I go out and buy it on day one. But I am intrigued, and I will be looking forward to the first impressions and the reviews of these games when they're out in people's hands, because they don't, as good as Cyberpunk 2077 was, I just, it didn't work. And that's going to stay in them forever, even if the vibe around the game is very, very positive now, and I'm really happy for that. But you're not going to get the day $1 out of me, man.
Yeah, Brian Salazar wrote in about this on Patreon, just like you can. He says, "Hello, Krusty Colin, Dainty Dustin, and Crispy Chris. With the asinine roadmap announcement from CD Projekt Red, I must say I'm disappointed by the overwhelmingly positive response by people. While I'm glad people are enjoying the Edge Runners anime and that people are satisfied with them more or less fixing the game, none of that fixes the root of the problem with Cyberpunk. They announced the project way too early and made promises they couldn't keep. They then proceeded to intentionally and maliciously lie about the game in order to borderline scam people into buying a broken game. Them doing the bare minimum of fixing the game doesn't excuse that. I personally won't get excited or care about any of the projects until they're out. Am I being overly dramatic, or are you also black-pilled by the reality that the majority of gamers will probably never care about shady stuff these studios do? Thanks." There is some, I mean, I agree, and this is reinforcing what Chris just said. I need to see, so I'm not a Witcher fan, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to play these Witcher games. I loved Cyberpunk 2077. I thought it was great. The good news is that by the time we get to Cyberpunk 2078, or whatever they're going to call it, there would have been one or two, or maybe all of those Witcher games that they're working on already released. And so the proof will be in the pudding. We're years and years away from seeing this game. We're years away from pre-ordering it and having the option to even put any money down.
We're a decade away.
Right.
We're probably a decade away from this thing, which is funny because that's kind of more or less how far Cyberpunk 2077 was away from its reveal trailer. I believe it was 2012.
Yeah, 2012.
Where they showed the first trailer with that archive song with the woman with the mantis blades. And to me, that's what's worrying about it. It's like, oh, it's the same. It's this again. They're being like, hey, we're gonna make this game. And look, obviously, this is a hypothetical game. Some of us might be dead by the time this game comes out. So like, who cares really? Yeah. But I feel like I don't know if announcing things this far in advance really does all that much. It's cool to know that they're working on Cyberpunk still, and they're not going to let the IP die, but I don't know. Knowing that it's going to be probably a decade before we even see this game, let alone play it, is kind of, I don't know. I can't really get all that excited about it.
I just think it's an interesting way to manage. It's just one option in managing a large independent studio, which is just to say like an almost publisher level studio. Yeah. You just say like, these are the games and just leave us alone. Like BioWare is kind of doing a similar thing, and to a lesser extent with Mass Effect and Dragon Age. In fact, they've been quietly publishing stuff about DragonAge. I just haven't been reporting it because I'm sick of talking about that game. But they even started publishing some stuff from the in-game codices of Dragon. Am I saying Dragon Quest? Dragon Age. And so there's different ways you can manage these expectations. You can either try to keep things very secret, and then people start digging things out. Then you lose the initiative. You lose the ability because of people like me of announcing your games. And I totally understand that. And so they want to protect that as well. I don't see it either way. I am more concerned about their ability to deliver a product that works. But what I'm saying about Cyberpunk not being a Witcher fan to me is just, we'll have a few products that they'll be able to prove it or not by that time, and we'll just know if they're different. That's fair, yeah. You know, and yeah. So I know Micah is really, really excited. She loves The Witcher. I mean, she's fucking so into it. She's reading one of that Andrei Sapkowski guy's like other books right now, and I was telling her about these Witcher games, and she's pretty amped up. But I do think there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. I just believe it, and they're getting close with The Witcher now because of the cross-media nature of it from the very beginning. I am glad. I mean, I think it's kind of a shitty law just because it is what it is. But I've said it before on the show, but Polish law, contractual law, has some sort of caveat in it where if a deal is considered unfair after the fact, it can actually be relitigated. And that's what happened with Andrei Sapkowski and CD Projekt. Like, he was basically given something insane, like $500,000. And that was it. And it was his choice. He didn't want a piece. He just wanted the money. And then it blew up in his face when the Witcher games became big. And they like basically redid the deal. In the United States, you would have been shit out of luck if you did that. So yeah, that's not that that's right or wrong, but that it's just, I'm a big believer in always taking the percentages. When I've consulted with companies, I always take options with their company. Never take money. Unless they want to give me both, but I'd rather have your options and own something than just have this money and it just comes and goes. All right.